Brothers and sisters, Africa's greatest tragedy is not poverty, not war, not hunger. It is the distance that has grown between our hearts. The chains that still exist are no longer made of iron. They are made of fear, of silence, of waiting for someone else to begin. Today, as Ibrahim Traoré and the new generation of African leaders rise, this message echoes across Burkina Faso, across Africa, and across the entire Black diaspora, a reminder that our real revolution begins when we unite as one African people.
If these words move you, leave your voice in the comments. Stand with the awakening, and subscribe, because this message is only the beginning. Africa is rising, but not with noise, with awareness. Ibrahim Traoré is not speaking for one nation. He speaks for an entire generation that refuses to be silent anymore. He is not calling for violence. He is calling for unity, dignity, and truth. He is reminding every black person, everywhere, that history has not ended. It is only waiting for those who dare to rewrite it. For too long, we have believed the lie that Africa's problems are natural, that we were destined to suffer. We were told that poverty is our identity, that dependence is our future, that the world must feed us, clothe us, protect us. But Traoré looks into the camera and says, "We can feed ourselves. We can defend ourselves. We can free ourselves." He is young, yet his words carry the weight of centuries. Born in the land of the upright people, Burkina Faso, he rose not as a politician, but as a soldier who saw the truth too closely to remain quiet. He watched foreign powers decide who should lead his people. He watched the wealth of the land leave in trucks and ships. He watched the courage of his country drain under promises that never came true. And he said, "Enough." He stood before the world and declared that Africa's greatest weapon is unity. And our greatest enemy is the lack of it. When we divide by tribe, by tongue, by religion, by border, we build the walls our oppressors could never build themselves. They no longer need chains. They use our mistrust. They no longer need armies. They use our silence. Traoré's message is simple but revolutionary. Africa is not poor. Africa has been made poor. For every resource that leaves our soil, our people are told to be grateful for a loan. For every barrel of oil shipped away, a speech about aid is made on television. For every diamond mined, a child drops out of school. He calls this the invisible war, the war of systems. And this war has no bullets. It has contracts, signatures, and interest rates. It has schools that teach Africans to love the West but forget their own languages. It has news networks that celebrate dependency as progress. It has leaders who wear African clothes but think with colonial minds. Traoré says that mental colonization is the hardest battle to fight, because it lives inside us. The enemy is not always outside. Sometimes he is sitting in our parliament smiling, calling it democracy. Sometimes he is in our own mind whispering, "You cannot do it yourself." But in Burkina Faso, something is changing. Villages that once waited for help have begun to help themselves. Communities that feared abandonment have started to build together. Youth who once dreamed of leaving now dream of rebuilding. They are learning to defend their homes, not just with weapons, but with knowledge, discipline, and unity. Traoré reminds them, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing tall even when fear surrounds you." And that courage is spreading. From Ouagadougou to Lagos, from Accra to Johannesburg, from Harlem to Haiti. Across the diaspora, his voice has become a mirror reflecting something long forgotten: pride. Every black person who hears him feels it. The echo of ancestors who built pyramids, forged empires, taught mathematics and medicine while Europe was still in darkness. He reminds us that history did not begin with slavery. It began with greatness, and it is time to return to it. He warns that Africa's enemies are still here, but now they smile. They come with contracts, NGOs, and investment funds. They arrive speaking of partnership, but leave with ownership. They offer loans that build nothing, agreements that extract everything. And when Africa dares to say no, they call it rebellion, Traoré says. "We are not rebelling. We are remembering. Remembering who we were before they told us what we could be. Remembering that independence means nothing without control over our own resources. Remembering that true freedom is the ability to decide our own destiny. But this path is not easy. It is filled with pressure, with threats, with isolation. When a nation stands tall, the world suddenly becomes concerned. Sanctions follow. Stories change. Allies disappear. Yet Burkina Faso stands. Wounded, yes, but standing. and that standing inspires millions who once believed resistance was impossible. Every revolution begins not with guns, but with belief. Belief that we deserve better. Belief that we are capable. Belief that unity is stronger than fear. Traoré speaks that belief into existence, and people listen, not because he is powerful, but because his words are pure. He does not promise luxury. He promises dignity. He does not seek admiration. He seeks awakening. He does not want followers. He wants builders. Builders of roads, of schools, of nations, of pride. He looks at the youth, the generation of social media, of global awareness, and says, "Stop waiting. Start creating." Because every day we wait, someone else decides our future. Every day we stay silent, another contract is signed. Every day we hesitate, another dream dies. Africa's story has always been written by outsiders.
They told us we were slaves.
They told us we were poor. They told us we were lucky to survive. But the truth is, the world has survived on Africa. Our minerals power their phones. Our land grows their food. Our labor fuels their industries. And still they call us dependent. Traoré's voice rises. We are not dependent. We are the foundation. The world cannot move without Africa. Yet Africa has been convinced it cannot move without the world. That is the illusion he seeks to destroy. The new Africa he envisions is not built on charity. It is built on courage. It is built on self-respect, on hard work, on shared destiny. It is an Africa where unity is not just a word in speeches, but a living force in every community. He calls for alliances, not of politicians, but of people. Farmers with engineers, teachers with soldiers, elders with youth, because the strength of a nation is not in its army. It is in its unity. And beyond Africa, his words travel. Across oceans, black communities hear him and nod. They see themselves in his struggle. They remember their ancestors' battles, from slave ships to plantations, from segregation to silent discrimination. They realize that the same systems that chained Africa still control their lives in different forms. His message is not one of hate. It is one of awakening. He does not call for separation. He calls for self-respect. To love Africa is not to hate others, it is to finally love ourselves. He says, Africa will no longer ask for permission to exist. That line shakes the soul. It is not arrogance. It is arrival. Arrival at a place where Africa sees itself not as a victim, but as a vision. The invisible enemies, the debt traps, the manipulated media, the cultural inferiority complex, they are strong. But they cannot stand forever against a people who have remembered who they are, and so the movement grows, not through armies, but through awareness, through millions of Africans and descendants of Africa saying, "We see you. We understand. We will no longer participate in our own oppression." That is what scares the world most, a united, conscious Africa. Because a united Africa needs no savior. It does not beg, it builds. It does not copy, it creates. It does not wait. It leads. Traoré reminds us that freedom has never been given. It has always been taken by those who believed they deserved it. And now a new generation is ready to take it, not with hatred, but with determination. Not with vengeance, but with vision. He speaks to the young woman selling fruit on the roadside, telling her she is not powerless. Her labor feeds a nation. He speaks to the student who feels hopeless, telling him that education means nothing if it teaches him to look down on his own people. He speaks to the farmer, the builder, the soldier, the artist, reminding them that their hands shape the future more than any foreign power ever could. And to every black person across the world, he says, remember your name, remember your strength, remember your origin, because once you remember, no one can make you forget again. Africa's power has always been collective. One tree cannot make a forest. One drum cannot make a rhythm. But when the trees stand together, they become a jungle that no storm can break. When the drums beat together, the world listens. This is why unity terrifies those who profit from division. Because when Africa unites, the global balance shifts. When we buy from each other, trade with each other, protect each other, we end dependence forever. Traoré envisions an Africa where resources stay home, where children grow up proud, where soldiers defend truth, not tyranny. He dreams of a continent that no longer exports its talent, but uses it to build its own destiny. He knows the road is long, the opposition fierce, the world skeptical. But he also knows that every revolution begins with one truth spoken loudly enough to awaken a million hearts. He believes that truth is this: Africa is not waiting to be saved. Africa is waiting to be united, so he stands, not as a savior, but as a symbol, a reminder that leadership is not about age, wealth, or title. It is about courage. The courage to speak when silence is safer. The courage to act when fear is easier.
The courage to believe when hope feels impossible. And that courage is contagious.
Across borders, across generations, across oceans, now. It is our turn to carry that message further. Our turn to look at each other not as rivals, but as reflections. Our turn to stop waiting for the world to change and start becoming the change. Because when Africa stands, the world must listen. When Africa unites, history must rewrite itself. When Africa remembers, the future begins. So rise wherever you are. If you are African by blood, by spirit, or by solidarity, rise. Speak the truth. Build with your hands. Teach with your heart. Protect with your soul. The time for begging is over. The time for rising has begun. And as Traoré's voice echoes through the continent, the message becomes clear. Africa is not a story of despair. It is a story of awakening. It is a drumbeat that cannot be silenced. It is a people rediscovering their power. Every black person must hear this, not to be angry, but to be alive again, not to hate, but to heal, not to divide, but to unite. The sun is rising over Africa, and this time it will not set.